Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show once again. Up first, we've got, this is a webcam shot of Dead Horse up on the Arctic coast there, eastern Arctic coast, really close to it. It's not right on the coastline. Anyway, you can see a pretty nice day there, blue sky and some lower clouds here off to the north. I believe this is a north-facing shot here, and pretty nice day, but however, the winds were blowing with gusts of 45 miles an hour out of the east, and Kaktovik down the coastline there had gusts of 50 miles an hour today. Temperatures in the lower 40s, I think 43 degrees at 3 p.m. this afternoon. So put a little wind chill onto that as well, but otherwise pretty good flying day, although it might have been a little bumpy, especially for smaller aircraft. On the hazardous weather graphic, the only place illuminated is here, the Eastern Alaska Range, and that's a wind advisory, which is in effect currently in effect and will remain so until 6 p.m. tomorrow evening on September 2nd. That's for winds of 20 to 30 miles an hour with gusts possibly above 60 miles an hour. And from there, we move to fire danger and see things kind of enhanced again from what we had yesterday. Copper River Basin expanded that and actually added some extreme fire danger in over there along the Copper River. That due to winds and little if any rainfall that occurred, but the increase in the winds today along the Copper River gusting 30 to 40 miles per hour out of the south, and that definitely boosts that fire danger. And also same thing going on here, the Kenai Peninsula. Hard to really, on this scale, the extreme danger there's East Anchorage and then right on down the lee side of the mountains down the peninsula due to gusty east winds. For example, McHugh Creek had a peak gust this afternoon about 66 miles per hour. And airport at Anchorage International Airport, Ted Stevens International Airport, gusts 35 miles an hour. And that extends down, not quite to the Homer area into Kamishak Bay, but down definitely across the greater Kenai area there in the central peninsula. And also out here on the west side of the Alaska Range, an area of very high fire danger. And again, also along the lee side of the Cusco Mountains, just east of Bethel there, high fire danger. And then also areas re-illuminated up here, Selwyn Valley, Kotzebue Sound, up toward just south of Kivalina, and then over toward Buckland, back into the very high fire danger, and then some scattered areas off to the east there across the Kobuk-Koyukuk valleys. And for satellite imagery, here's the storm center right through here in the front, roughly right through there at picture time here, which is 1 p.m. this afternoon, right across, looks like very close to Kenai, or just passing it, and still we're getting some shots of rain in Anchorage. Really, this system, not much of a rain producer, more of a wind producer, with those winds gusting to 66 miles an hour at McHugh Creek, and also higher elevations here at the Chugach Mountains, seeing winds 40 to 60 miles an hour in gusts. Otherwise, Cape Newenham had gusts of 56 miles per hour today, and the Alaska Range, Sparrowvon, gusts 50 miles an hour. Some other locations there, probably a little higher elevations, had gusts up around 60 to 70 miles an hour. So pretty windy through the western Alaska Range through the passes today. And also southerly winds, I mentioned, Copper River Basin there along the Copper River. That extending up into Delta Junction. They're getting gusts now have come up to about 40 miles an hour and expected to continue to do so. Otherwise, really not a lot of precipitation with this system. Had about 1/10 of an inch at Talkeetna, while Seward had about 2/10 of an inch today. Otherwise, Cordova, for example, had about 2/100 of an inch, and Anchorage about 2 or 3/100 of an inch. So really not even wetting rain in those areas. And the southeast coast, you're seeing kind of an increase in the clouds today over what you saw yesterday, especially up here in the north, getting some higher stuff moving in, but no precipitation yet. And low sort of slowly weakening as it pulls into the pulls northward here across eastern Bering Sea. And out here to the west, that's where heavier rainfall amounts were recorded. For example, at Togiak, they picked up 2/3 of an inch during the day today, and about a half an inch fell at Cape Newenham and also at Kipnuk there, with winds anywhere 30 to 35 miles an hour across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area, and actually winds gusting near 40 miles an hour at Unalakleet this afternoon, and also kind of windy across the Seward Peninsula as well. And really much of the western interior seeing a good increase in the winds. Of course, a tight gradient here, kicking those winds gusting possibly as high as 70 miles an hour and turning an arm today, with rain not all that moderate. I thought I would find a location that had something heavier, but even Portage only had like a couple of tenths of an inch, which is one of the normally wetter areas. But you can see on the lee side of the mountains here some sunshine up over the central interior areas, Tanana Valley. And as I mentioned, sunshine up over the north slope from the eastern Brooks Range here right on out to the Arctic coast, areas of sunshine. Fog really not a problem at all, and some clouds, but not too bad there over the southeast coast. And then pretty gusty northwest winds coming in around this with some trough, associated with a trough there, and a little bit of an increase in the precipitation. Looking at the forecast for tonight, that low continues to lift northward and really slowly weakening, but not too much there. The gradient does tend to slacken a little bit, but not that much. It's going to stay quite windy and wet here. Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, up into possibly the southern Kuskokwim Valley, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Winds with the low center pulling in close to the coast, probably those winds will drop off 15 to 25 miles an hour. And again, the wind gusting 60 miles an hour through the passes of the eastern Alaska Range and Delta Junction. And still some rain possibilities, light rain along the North Gulf Coast with that south to north flow. Front edging eastward brings a chance of rain into the north coast of the Panhandle, otherwise just increasing clouds elsewhere. This portion of the front north of the Alaska Range, dry, virtually precipitation free. Might pick up a little sprinkles along the Arctic coast there briefly. Otherwise, all the moisture will stay back out over the Bering Sea and along the southwest coast. And for tomorrow, Monday, trough swings in here, another round of rain and showers, kind of enhances, nothing really heavy, and breezy Kodiak Island right on up into the Yukon Delta across the Kuskokwim Valley. Seward Peninsula as that low center slowly weakens and continues to drift northward, resulting in westerly winds across the Bering Sea with a few scattered showers, but really not all that much in the way of precipitation. Gusty west winds, maybe some clearing. And Alaska Peninsula Eastern Aleutian is not looking too bad. Could see some afternoon sunshine. This front brings rain, light rain into the southeast coast, mostly over the northern areas and along the coast there, especially the north coast. And taking a look at the forecast for Tuesday, that front edges eastward slowly there, kind of dragging across the southern areas with some light rain that'll tend to become more showery in the afternoon across all of the southeast coast. Another trough here brings some showers or light rain into the Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast, up along the Alaska Range with sunshine. South Central Alaska, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, extending northwestward there with showers farther to the north. And again, still a frontal boundary just off the central Arctic coast. Another trough, more gusty winds and light precipitation, maybe some fog, lower flying conditions, southwest winds off the Bering into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, locally Bristol Bay. Lows for tonight for the Panhandle, upper 40s, lower 50s. For the overnight lows tonight, lower 40s here over the eastern interior. Milder Copper River Basin, or not too bad actually with the gusty winds continuing. Near 50 Tanana Valley, upper 30s eastern Arctic coast to lower 40s in the west. And 50 to 55 here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Bristol Bay, lower 50s Alaska Peninsula, near 50 in the Aleutians and Pribilofs. Highs for tomorrow, near 50 for the St. Lawrence Island area. Otherwise, 60s to lower 70s, central, eastern, and upper Tanana Valley. 40-mile country, mid-60s back to the west a little bit, lower 60s Bristol Bay, lower 60s South Central Alaska, Madawaska-Susitna Valley, and upper 50s to mid-60s over the Panhandle, warmest down south and coolest up to the north, followed by lows about the same as what we see tomorrow morning, jump to the highs. Looks like lower 60s eastern interior and 50s out west.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic for Monday morning. We've got a lot of IFR here for the Bering Sea, Aleutians, and into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta there to about Togiak Bay, northward across St. Lawrence Island, in close to Nome, VFR over the northern half of the state or so, but then see the central coast there and out toward the, about Umiat Airfield would be about marginal, and then on out toward the central Arctic coast IFR. IFR along and on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, Prince William Sound, south side of the Kenai Peninsula, southern Panhandle. And taking a look at the afternoon forecast, we've got IFR here along the southeast coast, marginal northern half, VFR southern half of the inside waters. IFR here for the Gulf of Alaska, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, easterly flow or southeast component there, keeping it socked in southern part of the Kenai Peninsula, and also up along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, marginal VFR Kodiak, and increasing or decreasing IFR here for the Bering Sea, especially the Bristol Bay area, southeast Bering, but holding on along the Yukon Delta coast, and not bad up there on the north slope or the eastern interior, and still a lot of IFR there for the western Aleutians, central Bering. And for Tuesday morning, areas of marginal VFR along with areas of IFR for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, IFR Norton Sound, southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, VFR for the most of the North Slope and Arctic coast, but marginal VFR along and south of the Brooks Range, IFR now inland here across southern Alaska and then right on down the southeast coast with VFR north of the Alaska Range, upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country right up across the Yukon Flats. And then for Tuesday afternoon, we've got some IFR scattered around with some marginal VFR scattered around and VFR scattered around here. Looks like Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula into Bristol Bay will be mostly VFR in the afternoon. Fogneck Island, but Kodiak Island will be marginal. And marginal VFR for the Panhandle, could be some isolated areas of VFR in there, but call it marginal with some IFR along the north coast. And looks like IFR a little more widespread here for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians than the marginal areas there, with the marginal mostly here over the eastern areas, Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula. Passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR becoming VFR in the afternoon, and lowest conditions also for Adigan appear to be early on with some improvement in the afternoon. In fact, both passes could be VFR the entire day if the sea lanes in the morning hours get down to that threshold. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR, lowest conditions, both passes will be on the eastern entrances. And rainy starting out IFR, becoming marginal in the afternoon. Again, lowest conditions on the eastern approach. Windy, VFR through the pass into the north, possible marginal VFR again, southern entrance here at times throughout the day. And Isabel looks like it'll be marginal VFR as well as Mentasta. And Tanita, pessimistic forecast here, marginal VFR. And for Portage, though, IFR for sure on the eastern entrance, marginal VFR on the west side. And for Chilkoot and White, looks VFR. For the freezing levels here, about 12,000 feet, 10 to 12,000 feet here across the southeast coast with upper level ridging in over the area, but southwest jet here just to your west. And about 8,000, 6 to 8,000 feet here, slowly cooling off out toward the central Bering, drops down to 4,000 feet here to the west and northwest. Icing, quite an area of moisture coming in with that system lifting north over the eastern Bering Sea. So we've got some light to isolated moderate rime icing above about 7,000 feet here in northern Bering Sea, Seward Peninsula, sloping up to, well, about 7,000 also here. Terrain enhanced areas could mean considerable moderate rime icing here, Kenai Peninsula, western Alaska Range. And then above 10,000 feet, there could be considerable moderate rime icing, mostly over the central and northern Panhandle, icing free to the south. Jet stream, southwest flow here, ridging kind of shifting off to the east and lifting northward. Cool troughs out here over the Bering Sea, 9,000 feet, south to north flow here, 20 to 40 knots. And southwest, 25 to 35 over the Panhandle. Westerlies over the Bering Sea, same pattern at 3,000 feet. South winds here as this low tracks northward, 20 to 40 knots over the western interior, lighter to the east. Turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop, western Alaska, Kodiak Island, and the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
And we love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Yeah. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread. Right. The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt. Sure. So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing.
Okay.
That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
This sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels.
Okay.
And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then.
Sure.
And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano going
erupting.
off. Yep. Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength? That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths.
Okay.
But it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there.
Okay.
So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns.
All right.
All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically, the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue.
Wow.
The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another.
Very interesting.
It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the North Slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood.
Sure.
In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. it's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job.
Sure.
Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far. And I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, you know, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing, and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, a little bit changed, continuing to kind of melt away up here along the ice edge, main ice edge, a little bit, and hardly even on the chart anymore here northwest of Wrangell Island. Just that little bit right there, and really no big changes expected for the next 5 or 6 days. And for the coastal water forecast here for the south coast of the Panhandle, southerlies 15 to 20 knots and 20 knots on the north coast, extreme north coast, 25 knots for small craft advisories, 11-foot seas out of the southeast. Also Lynn Canal, small craft advisories, southerlies at 25. Stevens Passage, southeast at 15, and Clarence Strait south at 10 with 2-foot seas. Heading into Tuesday, southeast 15 for the central southern inside waters, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, south or so, 15 knots, seas 4 feet. Northwest 15 here on the south coast with 11-foot seas, and then west-southwest on the north coast here with also 11-foot seas, so small craft advisories for the entire coastline. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, southeast 25, seas 4 feet. North Gulf Coast, south 25, seas 10 feet. South 30 for the Barren Islands, 11-foot seas. Southeast 25, Kamishak Bay. And southern Cook Inlet, south winds at 30 knots, 11-foot seas. Southeast 20 with 5-foot seas north of the Forelands. Outlook for Tuesday, Cook Inlet, south to southwest, 20 knots or so. Seas 5 feet. Southwest 20, Kamishak Bay. Only 15 knots for the Barrens out of the south, and southwest 15 to 20 for the North Gulf Coast with seas 8 to 9 feet. Prince William Sound, winds coming back down to 10 knots, basically from the southeast with seas subsiding to 2 feet. Kodiak Island, south to southwest here, 25 to 30 knots there, and seas as high as, let's see, that's 18 feet here on the Pacific side of the island there. And gales here for the Alaska Peninsula, westerlies 35 knots, seas 15 to 17 feet, and Bristol Bay southwest at 30 with 9-foot seas. And moving on to Tuesday, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, southwest 30 knots, 9-foot seas turning south at 25 in Bristol Bay with 7-foot seas. Lighter winds on the Pacific side from Cape Sarachef all the way up to Sitkinak, southwesterlies 15 to 20 with seas 7 feet, and southwest 15 east side of Kodiak, but Shelikof Strait a tad higher with 20 knots out of the southwest. Fox Islands tomorrow, on Alaska Island, west winds 30 knots, seas 15 feet. Unamak Island, west 25 knots, seas 12 to 13 feet. Adak and Atka, southwest or west at 25 with 8 to 10 foot seas. And the 25-knot winds extend out to about Amchitka, and then they turn westerly at about 20 from there on out. Tuesday, even lighter winds out in that zone. Southerlies at 10 knots, about 15 from Amchitka toward Adak. Central Aleutians, though, south to southwest, 20 knots, 7-foot seas, and then winds, small craft advisories for the Fox Islands, south to southwest, 25 to 30 knots, seas 8 to 10 feet. And for the southwest coast, west-southwest, 30 knots. Northwest 30, St. Matthew Island. Gale force westerlies for the Pribilofs with seas at 13 feet. Northeast 25 for St. Lawrence Island. And then south 25 for both Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, 7 to 8 foot seas. Gales here for the coast, southwest coast. Southwest 35 to 40 knots, strongest south of Nunivak Island, 11 foot seas. Gales also for the Pribilof, southwest 35 and seas 11 feet. Beaufort Sea coast, east side, gale warnings, east winds continue, 35 knots, seas 13 feet, 30 knots. Small craft advisory winds on the central coast, 15 on the west side, and then 20 to 25 knot east-northeast there for the Chukchi Sea. Outlook for Tuesday, southeast 20 here from Wales up to Cape Thompson, then turning easterly and falling back to 10 knots on the western and central coast, and lighter winds finally into the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline there, 15 to 20 from the east-southeast. For tonight again, this front pushes eastward, tries to push some rain into the northern panhandle. Anyway, windy and rainy, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, up across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Front pretty dry here north of the Alaska Range. Don't look for any precipitation with it, but a wind advisory out tonight and tomorrow for the eastern Alaska Range for gusts 60 miles an hour. Pretty brisk winds out over the Bering Sea as this low pulls northward, gradually diminishing for the Aleutians. Not too much precipitation out here. There will be an enhanced area here swinging into the southwest with that trough tomorrow, and this front pushes a chance of rain into the northern panhandle, and that drags through on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.